Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of Tech Tuesday on the Educational AD podcast. We're going to be right back with today's special tech guest, but as always, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are companies that I used as an athletic director. They're all great. I recommend that you use them too. So take the next 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview, and then go visit these sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches, all of our coaches, just loved the platform. Our kids loved the videos, and our parents, of course, they loved the streaming. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank Ohio University's Online Masters in Athletic Administration. This is an affordable 20-month, totally online program that also allows you to complete 11 NIAAA leadership training courses. It's also going to connect you to a nationwide network in athletic administration. To get started, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We want to say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day for things like scheduling, uploading scores and results and rosters. How about student athlete eligibility and clearance? Who doesn't do that every day? Go to homecampus.com. They're going to do all these things and more. They'll do them better and they're going to do them faster. That's homecampus.com. We also want to thank Gipper for their support. Your students are on social media, so are a lot of their parents. And if you're not posting content to celebrate their accomplishments and promote your own program, you're really missing out. Go to Gipper.com. Their team will have you creating world-class content in seconds. And it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an AD was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to their website, sidelineinteractive.com, and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. We'd like to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to tell your school's unique history and share your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. We also want to thank our good friends at Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and ended up with little, if any, return on investment? Those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. Go to Snap Raise. Check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that only wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that information is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent, maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another segment of Tech Tuesday on the Educational AD podcast. Got a really cool show today. We actually have two tech guests. I think you're going to like what they have to talk about. We're visiting today with Nicole Fowler and Adam Hernandez. They are both at Phillips Exeter Academy up in New Hampshire. You might remember a couple of weeks ago, we had Jason Baisden, the athletic director at Exeter, on. If you're not familiar with Exeter, it's been around for a couple of years. And Jason was sharing how his athletic trainer and strength and conditioning coach worked together, which I think is what we call a best practice. And I wanted to get Nicole and Adam on. So, Nicole and Adam, welcome to Tech Tuesday and the Education Lady podcast.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We're going to dive into all things Exeter here in a minute, but as always, we like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So, Nicole, why don't you go first? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to high school and college? Maybe tell us your life story in 2 minutes and how you ended up at Phillips Exeter.
Perfect. Fitting the life story into 2 minutes. That's a good challenge to start us off with here. But I'm born and raised in a small town in Massachusetts called Maynard, Mass. So I spent most of my years growing up in Maynard playing sports. I have two brothers, one older by 2 years and one younger by 2 years. So kind of sandwiched between a lot of competition and, as you can imagine, just a lot of things in athletics growing up. So I've always had my hand in a little bit of athletics and kind of sport as I grew up and went through my years. I went to Maynard High School for 2 years and then Hudson High School for my second 2 years. And after that, I went to Springfield College. I played soccer for all 4 years when I was at Springfield, and I studied exercise science there. So ironically, I kind of started as a physical therapy major there. And I quickly realized that I wanted to be a little bit more in on the action. That was my first exposure to a weight room and training with a team and having a female strength coach. So I didn't know really the strength and conditioning world existed, A, and B, you could be a female and be successful in this field. So a lot of great mentorship at Springfield. After Springfield, I went to Merrimack College. I got my master's degree from there. I did a fellowship there as well, so I really got exposure to coaching and working with teams and programming, with, again, a lot of really, really great mentorship as well throughout my time at Merrimack. After that, I jumped over to Denver, Colorado, and I spent 4 years out at University of Denver. So again, working with a very wide variety of teams, athletes, even some professional athletes while I was out there. And really being exposed to that high performance model. So a lot of technology, a lot of great kind of education and exposure. And after that, I jumped back over to Massachusetts. So wanted to be back around family and kind of back on the East Coast in New England. And I got a job at Phillips Exeter and have had a blast here for the past 3 years. I'm starting up on year number 4. And recently just took a job as the head strength and conditioning coach here as well. So I'm excited for what's to come. And it's been great kind of working with Adam and learning the ins and outs of the high school setting, and looking forward to whatever's next here at Exeter for sure.
Oh, it's very cool. I appreciate you sharing that journey. And we're going to dive into the program that you and Adam have at Phillips Exeter, later in the show. But looking at your path, you mentioned that the physical therapy track, that wasn't for you. Once you kind of committed to, excuse me, that strength and conditioning route, was there any one moment or maybe a series of moments that maybe at the time it didn't seem like much, but now looking back, you can say, hey, that was a significant moment for me in my growth? Anything stick out for you?
In the strength and conditioning world specifically, there has been a couple of those moments, like those light bulb moments or those really exciting times. And I think it definitely started when I was at Springfield and I was doing some internships. I interned at Holy Cross and I interned also kind of at a private facility in Western Mass as well. And really just those first couple days where I was in charge of running a warm up or just the head coaches were letting go of the reins a little bit and putting some trust into me. That's really when I started to have a lot of fun while I was doing it. And I think that once kind of the tables turned and I was able to find some enjoyment and gain some confidence in a space that's typically pretty intimidating, is really when that turning point was for me.
Oh, well, again, appreciate you sharing that moment. We have a lot of people that are at the beginning of the career. We've had aspiring ADs, aspiring coaches on, and I think it's important for them to hear about the journeys that we all take. Adam, let's go ahead and hear about your background, and again, how'd you get into the athletic training world, and what brought you to Phillips Exeter?
Sure, thank you. And Nicole knows about me, but I've never been a succinct speaker, so I'm going to do my best to get this 2 minutes. And something I always really appreciate about doing things like this is getting an opportunity to get to meet you and also, honestly, to get to learn a little bit more about Nicole's story. I know her obviously pretty well, but it's always still great to hear some new pieces of what brought her here. My story, born and mostly raised in the Southwest in New Mexico, actually. I'm a military kid, so I came from a military family, growing up sort of in military and Air Force bases down in the Southwest. When I was in high school, moved up to New York State to be closer to my father's family. That's where they're originally from after he got out of the Air Force. Went to high school in a place called Amsterdam, New York, which is just a little bit west of Albany, New York. Actually, pretty standard athletic training story. I was doing some distance cross country running. Actually, happened to run at the Olympic Training Center at a running camp. Sprained my ankle, nothing too significant, but that was my first moment of, oh, this is what an athletic trainer is, and this is what they can do for folks. So that was my junior year, and I thought, hey, this is a pretty cool job. Maybe I want to do this thing. Started looking into different schools that would have this program and actually found the University of New Hampshire up here. And there was an individual there, his name's Eric Schwartz, and he's a really talented athletic trainer and educator who was doing a lot of research at that time around injury prevention and football equipment removal. And I knew, which is a little bit weird knowing this kind of as a junior, but I knew I wanted to do some research and learn about technology. And so looking at their program, they had a biomechanics major as also an athlete training major. And so 4 years at the University of New Hampshire. And then I did a year at Indiana State, getting my master's in athletic training. And then at the time, there was only 2 of these in the U.S. Athletic training fellowships, and one happened to be back in New Hampshire. And so I applied and became one of 4 people in the U.S. doing a postgraduate fellowship. And one of the focuses there, again, was research. And luckily, because it was really close to my mentor, Eric Schwartz, I got to do a couple of research projects during that fellowship program, again, using technology and really exploring sort of what it meant to have objective measures when you're thinking about doing patient care. So for me, that's the short version of how in my path to getting through my education. After my education, I worked in a variety of settings, the collegiate setting, and then also the Olympic setting. I worked for the U.S. luge team, which was super cool. Not many places in my profession do you get to travel the U.S. And the world, honestly, doing healthcare. Sometimes the only healthcare provider, if you're in the middle of Russia, you're the person, right? And so that was a really cool experience. After my time there, I really thought, something I'm missing is a little bit of that education, and something I really appreciate about your guys's podcast is the educational athletics piece, right? And I think a little bit about educational sports medicine or sports performance. And I was really missing the opportunity to not only care for students, but also or patients, but also educate them a little bit. And so that got me to thinking about, where do I want to go next? There was an opening at Tabor Academy, which is another independent school over by the Cape Cod area. I worked there for 4 years, and then had an opportunity when the position here 10 years ago opened to be the head at Phillips Exeter, and I jumped on that opportunity to come work at a place like this where I felt aligned with the school's mission, and the opportunity to work with student athletes, do some education around their health and wellness, and to think about how do we create as you alluded to earlier, a best practice model in the independent school world, and that is what I think we're here to talk about a little bit today is how do we do those things that you're talking about? How do we combine athletic training and strength and conditioning in a meaningful way that really helps our student athletes?
Wow, great summary there of all your stops. You mentioned the luge just recently on the podcast. We've had two different guests, one from the United States, one from Puerto Rico, that are Olympic. They've competed in Olympics in skeleton, and
Yep.
I tell them, boy, luge wasn't dangerous enough. We had to say, well, hey, let's go down head first. But that's very cool. Um, so many schools, and I don't know the statistics, but I'm guessing there are more schools without a trainer and without a strength coach than there are with still, unfortunately. For that athletic director that's listening right now, and Nicole, I'm not forgetting about you, but for that athletic director that's listening now, that they just don't have an athletic trainer. Um, yeah, of course, there's that old saying, well, you're going to pay for one now or you're going to pay for one later with a lawsuit. What's another chunk of advice that you can give to that AD listening somewhere that they don't have a trainer but they know they need one? How can they talk to their principal, their superintendent, their school board? What's your advice?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I definitely have heard that saying many times, right? Like you're going to pay for it later if you don't have one now, and we're very fortunate here at Phillips Exeter that I'm actually one of five, because this institution has done exactly what you said and put their money where their mouth is, right? And have really understood the importance of the work that we can do with our students. If I as I think about my stops along the way and different opportunities that I've had to advocate for my profession, but also to think about increasing staffing in my case or creating positions, I would actually honestly point you to the National Athletic Training Association website. They have a ton of resources that are really best practice models about how to not only increase staffing, but to gain staffing. And there's a whole bunch of different levers you can pull to make that happen, right? Are you thinking about creating partnerships with your boosters? Are you thinking about creating partners with your school district if you're a public school? There's also different models that think about the not only financial value that is added when you have an athletic trainer, but also, as we've kind of alluded to a little bit, the educational value that your students get when they have an athletic trainer, thinking about their health and wellness and safety in a way that your coaches can't always think about it because they're also thinking about the X's and O's and the victories. In addition to sort of doing what we hope all coaches do, which is create an atmosphere of education. So that would probably be my first easy answer, would be to, hey, look at those resources that are on that website. They're robust and really have been helpful in my work in terms of looking for athletic trainers. And then I would just leave it up to thinking about those case studies that you might have in your institution, right, of where you didn't have an athletic trainer and an outcome for a student didn't go well. I think often when you're able to talk about those cases with stakeholders, those really help. And as you think about trying to justify, loosening some purse strings to get an athletic trainer in your office or your department.
That's such great advice, Adam. Thanks so much. So, athletic directors, if you don't have a trainer, here's one resource. Go to the NATA, the National Athletic Trainers Association. Um, get some information, get some contacts. See what you can do to create that presentation to help your principal, your superintendent, your school board realize that they really do need to provide you, your students, your coaches with an athletic trainer. For listeners, we're visiting today with Nicole Fowler and Adam Hernandez. Both are at the Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. We're going to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. Hey, as always, we want to say thanks to all of our sponsors. We couldn't do it without their help. And remember, these are all companies that I used as an athletic director. They're all great. I trust them. I want you to trust them too. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Huddle, our coaches, all of our coaches, not just our football coaches, but all of our coaches, love the tools that Huddle provided. Go to huddle.com for more information. We want to say thank you to Home Campus. Home Campus is one of those platforms that you're going to use every single day for scheduling, for rosters, for communication. How about student athlete eligibility and clearance? Who doesn't do that every day? Go to homecampus.com for more information. We want to thank the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, and it was a great experience. Go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. They're going to help you create world-class marketing content for your teams, for your athletes, for your program. And it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. You heard me say many times that probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com to find out all the things they can do for you. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. We want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or your school's Hall of Fame. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Touch screen, you got to be kidding me. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You're going to be very glad you did. We want to say thank you to Snap Raise. If you've ever been frustrated after spending weeks and weeks with a fundraiser, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. That's snapraise.com. And last but not least, we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that information is incredibly valuable, especially when you're visiting with that frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to Athletic Surveys for more information. Like I said, you're going to be glad you did. All right, let's get back to our interview. We're visiting today with Nicole Fowler. She's the head strength and conditioning coach, and Adam Hernandez. He's the head athletic trainer, both at the Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. Nicole, share with our listeners in some broad brushstrokes some of the, let's say, foundational principles that you think are important for your strength and conditioning program. Now, our listeners, they probably run the gamut from, well-funded and well-equipped strength and conditioning facilities to that coach in a small town that's wearing multiple hats as an AD, a strength coach, and maybe coaching two teams, and their weight room is, let's say, rather Spartan. So what are some of the things that you do that you think are foundational to the success that you've had at Phillips Exeter?
That's a great question. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in the X's and O's and kind of the nitty gritty of strength and conditioning, especially in a space like what we have. We are very lucky to have a weight room and to have some dedicated space for strength and conditioning and our athletics in general, as well as our physical education department. But I think it's important to continue to remind yourself that most of the students that you're working with are still growing and they're young. So first and foremost, it's important to create a positive environment. So you are in charge of setting up your space and making it a space that your student athletes can explore, they can fail, and they can learn from it, right? So you're providing some educational athletics and educational kind of strength and conditioning specifics to get them to understand the process. And I think it's very important to lay this foundation for whatever they have next in their lives. You want them to be successful in a space that's pretty intimidating when they go to college, if they aren't playing athletics, when they're beyond college and they're at Planet Fitness as an adult and want to continue to stay in shape. So I think, again, creating confidence and creating a space that's going to provide a positive experience for them, that's inclusive and that they have some ability to explore. You're laying that foundation and you're giving them obviously the guidelines and the programming, and you're teaching them technique and making sure that they're safe. So give them the constructs, but give them some freedom to explore as well, is what I would say from more of an environment perspective. I think from a strength and conditioning perspective, you want them to get strong in those foundational movement patterns. So squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, making sure that their posture is great with whatever they're doing. And then getting them to understand what muscles that their sports are using, and then kind of fill in the buckets and making sure that they're not getting those overuse injuries or those kind of little nagging aches and pains with the programming that you're giving them. The other piece that's important, I think, in the high school setting too, is we have a lot of multi-sport athletes. So that was something when I came from college to high school, I never really had to deal with. I was lucky enough to have one season and program around that season, but just really taking the whole year into consideration. Again, those muscle groups that the sports are using, and then filling in the gaps and periodizing out your plan. Starting very general, getting a little bit more specific as your season goes on or as your training goes on. But making sure that they're safe and healthy and getting what they're not getting in practice to keep all those muscles working the right way.
Oh, wow. A ton of great points. And you bring up the multi-sport, question. And as the athletic directors listening, they're all applauding that because, we are, as part of educational-based athletics, we're promoting that multi-sport experience. You also mentioned, the idea of, yes, performance enhancement. We're in the way, we're getting stronger, we're getting faster, we're getting more mobile. But there's also that injury prevention aspect that strength and conditioning has. Adam, I'm going to jump over to you. How do you work with Nicole? How does your staff work with the strength and conditioning staff from not just, injury prevention and rehab, but also work with them from a performance improvement standpoint?
Yeah, thank you for that question. For me, I'm often in environments where I have to talk to families or parents or other coaches. They always inevitably ask me, "What are you guys doing for injury prevention?" And I tell them every single time, without a doubt, that the number one injury prevention techniques that we can use is a strong and dedicated strength and conditioning program. So the work that Nicole and her staff does is vital for my ability to prevent injuries, right? They are the folks that are hopefully seeing the students regularly. They're the ones that are creating, as Nicole's talked about, a periodized program. They're the ones that are also thinking about those different buckets to fill to make a more holistic strengthening or conditioning or wellness program. And they're also the folks who are able to really think about how do they pair in-season lifting with all the other things that a student athlete might be doing in their day-to-day life. So for me, first and foremost, injury prevention starts in the weight room, or it starts even on the sideline doing some of those agility drills or mobility exercises that the strength and conditioning staff does a really great job programming. And then sort of the second piece of that is how do we work together? And honestly, it's all about creating open lines of communication. It's nothing different than any other sort of group that's working together to help maximize performance. It's really about how do we regularly communicate to make sure that we have a sense or a pulse of each student athlete, but also a team. So it's things like regular meetings with Nicole and her staff to say like, hey, what are you seeing in the weight room? Are there particular programs that are having difficulty in the weight room, or there are particular athletes that seem to just be, moving slowly? And that's where we'll talk a little bit about technology that helps us kind of measure those things. But but for me, it's open communication. And it goes both ways. It has to be bi-directional. So when we see a student athlete who might be injured, you'll frequently see me, after I get them out the door, going over to the strength and conditioning office or the weight room and saying, "Hey, Nicole, I had student X in today. Their hamstrings bothering them a little bit. I do think it's okay for them to exercise, and honestly, they probably need to exercise. Can you do me a favor and just sort of regress an exercise or make it a little bit simpler as it relates to a lunge or something?" I might also say, "Hey, let's avoid plyos today." And really, it takes that creation of collaboration, but also psychological safety, for me to be able to say, "Hey, Nicole, I trust you." And I don't have to be in the driving seat, right? Like, I don't have to tell you exactly what to do, because I know if I just tell you, "Hey, avoid lower body," that you're going to do something for that student athlete that still gets them gains. And I don't have to be the one who's creating that programming. So I think for me, it's just regular communication. It's creating opportunities for us to be in dialogue often and frequently. And again, always sort of centering our student athlete as the prime, sort of a piece of our thinking and our conversation.
Yeah, I love the communication part. And I understand, and I want our listeners to understand here, that, Exeter has, I'm going to say you're probably one of, if not the, best program, just because you have the facilities, you have the resources, you have the people like yourselves and your staff, that allow you to do that. So the next question is on the communication. Um, how is your coaching staff? I'm going to guess they're on board, because they'd have to be dopes not to see the great resources they have here. But sometimes, let's say a less resource-packed school, the strength coach or the AD, whomever, might have that coach that has a little bit of knowledge. Maybe they played or spent some time in the weight room, and they want to do their program as opposed to the program. So is that a thing at Exeter? Have you had to work with that at all?
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't say directly that, but definitely bits and pieces of that for sure. And I think we're in an interesting setting and a unique setting, that again, I wasn't super exposed to prior to being in a boarding school world. A lot of your coach communication kind of comes offline, so to speak, right? We're in the dining hall and you see the soccer coach, and you have kind of like a one-off conversation with them about how things are going or things like that. A lot of our coaches are teachers. So finding time for a sit-down meeting, especially on the other side of campus, is difficult. So how can everybody communicates differently, and you just have to build relationships with whoever you're working with and understand how things work. Some of our coaches will come in and they'll work out during one of their free periods, and that's when I'll be able to have, again, a quick conversation with them, or just touch base, or whatever it is. But I think to get that buy-in, or to get the coaches to see the value in what you're doing, it's going to come from education, and it's going to start small. I think that you can't go in, or I couldn't have gone in and tried to reinvent the wheel or change everything all at once, right? Maybe if you have a coach that doesn't necessarily want their team in the weight room, if you have the time and the availability for it, see if you can go warm them up before their practice, or get out onto the field and do an agility session, or something like that. Or maybe they come in and they foam roll after practice, or whatever it is. But again, just kind of chipping away at those smaller things. And I do love if a team comes in and they lift in season, if the coach hops in and they get some exposure to what their team is doing as well, with the strength and conditioning specifically. I think that, again, just building those relationships and understanding how each and every coach works, and not trying to take a one size fits all approach to A, the teams, and B, the coaches of those teams.
Yeah. And again, more graded advice for those ADs and coaches that are listening. We call this segment Tech Tuesday, and Adam, you kind of alluded to that last time you talked, that you guys have the ability to use some cool and some, let's say, important, technical enhancement. So, Nicole, I'm going to stick with you. What's something on that tech scale that might not be out there for some of our listeners, but you think has been a great addition to the program that you're able to do for your student athletes?
The thing that comes immediately to my mind is our force plates. So we recently just integrated with Hawken Dynamics, which is a force plate company out of Maine. But they work with a lot of colleges and professional teams as well. It's a super simple system. We like to call them very expensive bathroom scales to put them in very layman's terms, but we get all of our athletes on our force plates constantly, at least once a week. And the best part about working with Hawken is that the interface that it uses, the student athletes can test themselves. And I think when it comes to having resources and only having 2 strength coaches for our 56 sports that we do have, we need to give some of those athletes autonomy and have a little bit of trust in them to take some ownership of their own process. So they'll come in, they'll test themselves on the force plates a lot of the times. And then that just gives us some norms. And I think that's the most important thing that the data has given us up to this day now is that we have norms and we have data for individual athletes as well as teams. So if a team trains with us in the off season, we can see the progress that they're making. And then once they get in season, if their metrics are declining a little bit, how can we utilize strength and conditioning in a way to, again, fill those buckets and to get them into that kind of performance parameter that we want to see. So we love using the force plates. If there's ever an injury, we can utilize them for return to play because we have that baseline data and we have a lot of metrics that we've accumulated over the years. And again, consistency is key. I think that we know our setting and we know that we're not going to get the perfect test all of the time with the most consistent warm-ups and the best kind of setting for testing. But I think the more data we can collect, the better, because then if we do have an outlier, we'll be able to see that quicker and be able to make some change on the front end so that we don't have to react. We can be a little bit more proactive in terms of our development.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. We'll do this again at the end of the podcast, but Nicole, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, find out more about your program or just add you to their network, what's the best way they can get a hold of Nicole Fowler?
They could email me with my Exeter email, which is nfowler@exeter.edu. We also have an Instagram account for our weight room and strength and conditioning program in general, which is Phillips _Exeter_strength. And we love to utilize our Instagram a lot, and the athletes really love to see what we put out there as well. So anyway, out of those 2 to contact me would be awesome.
All right, very cool. We're going to come back with more. Adam, now it's your turn. What's something again on that cool tech side, but at the same time, something that you found to be very beneficial for the student athletes, the coaches, the program, from the athletic training perspective?
Sure. I would first echo Nicole. One of the first things that jumped in my mind was the force plates because of that baseline data that we can really look to return a student athlete back to those norms if they're injured. And then I sort of have 2 answers. I'm gonna go with another technology one first, and I'm gonna do that shortly. And then I'm actually going to talk about something else that I think might be more sort of in the possible wheelhouse for some of those schools who might not have the resources we do. So the first one I would point to is this year we've used technology called Kinetech. It's a LiDAR camera. You point it at a direction, you have a kid do a motion, a squat, a lunge, and it gives us a whole bunch of different metrics, but really the metrics are to measure sort of asymmetries between a right or a left. It gives us a baseline to see how a student moves, and then we try to either return a student to that baseline if they're injured, or it also gives us an opportunity to see if a student athlete actually has a deficit when they're quote unquote healthy. And that's where strength and conditioning would come into play and say, hey, I just noticed when we did our screening, these 10 students had sort of a deficiency on the right leg. Maybe as you program, compensate for that or help to program for that. So that's a technology piece that we have been using, which has been really helpful. But I'm going to go a little bit more low tech for some folks. And in my profession, this is something that's been gaining notoriety for the last 5 years or so. But something we use pretty frequently that's low tech is patient rated outcome measures. And what these are is they can be as simple as a survey, right? It might be 6 questions that sort of say, hey, how's your sleep, for example? You answer these 6 questions. How's your general anxiety? You might answer these 6 questions. One of them that we use a lot is a psychological readiness scale. So a student who gets injured, as we work through their rehab, we'll have them in intermittent increments take this survey that says, hey, how ready are you to return to sport? Because I think oftentimes we forget in our rush of day-to-day to kind of check in with our patients and say, how are you actually doing? What does health and wellness look like beyond some of the data metrics that we have? Like your strength looks good, but if you're not confident in your rehabbed leg, then I probably shouldn't put you back on the field. And so these surveys, there's tons of them out there in the world. You just Google patient-rated outcome measures, and there's a whole number of them. And I think, again, as Nicole talked about, you start small, right? You pick a couple patient-rated outcome measures and you say, hey, with my X team, I'm going to have them come in every week, and we might ask them, what does your anxiety look like, right? Because if we're seeing that this team is generally pretty anxious, or we have a couple athletes that are really anxious, sometimes we can correlate that to injury. Sometimes we can correlate that to, oh man, it's that time of the school year where all the kids are taking finals, and it's likely that their stress is possibly going to affect their performance. And so having those data points, we then work together as a team between strength and conditioning or with our coaches to say, hey, maybe dial back a little bit, right? Or maybe this is the time to push forward. We have a little bit of break in time. It looks like their anxiety or their sleep has improved. Let's push it. Let's really make our strength and conditioning this week be our focus. So I think one technology piece that we use, and then one that's a little bit more low tech, that's as simple as a paper and a pencil that we use pretty often.
Oh, that's right. So, and sometimes, simple is the best way to go. Same question, Adam. If one of our athletic directors, any of our listeners out there, wanted to connect with you, add you to their network, or pick your brain about, how they can better, connect their athletic training and strength and conditioning program, what's the best way they can get a hold of Adam Hernandez?
Sure. Like Nicole, our simplest way is email. So my email is the letter E as an elephant, Hernandez. That's HERNANDEZ at exeter.edu. And then we also do have an Instagram as well. And I just want to make sure I actually get it right because I always get it wrong. But it's Exeter Athletic Training and Instagram. So that's one we talk about frequently. And something else is we're really excited this coming year is Nicole and I are thinking about ways to be more purposeful in our own collaborative work. And so I would definitely follow one of those 2 pages because I think shortly we'll probably come up with our combined sports performance and student athlete health Instagram that's really going to be a little bit more intentional about including athletic training, strength and conditioning, and then a couple of other components like mental skill building and nutrition as well.
What a great idea. Boy, that could almost turn into a book series of some kind. We might have to talk about that later on. Let's go and wrap things up. And Adam, we'll start with you. I've alluded to it a couple times. Many schools still don't have an athletic trainer. They don't have a strength and conditioning coach. For that AD that's listening right now, what's some advice, what's something that you can give them short of, hiring a full-time athletic trainer, what would you consider to be a couple of best practices that they can put in their toolbox?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? And it's hard to know because each institution and each place has their own sort of hurdles and roadblocks. But I think for me, Nicole's actually alluded to it quite often, and I think it's all about communication, right? And so it's having opportunities for folks to be in regular dialogue. So I think one thing that's great about having an athletics program is you have many coaches that are coming from many different places, and you've said it too. They all wear different hats, right? And they all have different skills. And so the more often you can bring your coaches together to have communication and talk about, hey, this really works in my programming, or this doesn't go so well based off of our population. I think that's always a really great place to start, right? Using each other as resources, using each other as mentors or sort of collaborators or co-conspirators in your health and wellness and strength and conditioning programming is always probably where I would start, right? And that's as an athletic director, finding opportunities in a really busy school day or school year or season to bring your coaches together to talk about your concerns and issues has always been something I've always valued. And that might be an opportunity for you to partner with a local PT group or orthopedic group to bring in someone who might be able to speak about an injury prevention programming, or might be able to show you, in the case of a strength and conditioning coach, some of the best practice foam rolling techniques, right? And you're not going to learn everything, but the more you can do that in-service work, I think really helps. And really, quite honestly, as you look into your communities, there are more than often than not, there's someone out there who would love to come in and speak to your coaches about injury prevention or health and wellness, usually usually free, because they all understand the value of having healthy population, especially adolescents. So again, looking for those resources in your community and also tapping your own community to think about supporting each other in health and wellness or sports performance is what I would encourage folks to do.
Okay. And one more time, if somebody wants to reach out and connect, what's the best way they can get a hold of Adam Hernandez?
AE Hernandez at exeter.edu.
All right. Well, thanks again for sharing with us today. Nicole, your turn. You're talking to that athletic director, that coach. They're out there on an island. They just don't have the resources at this point to do everything they want to do. What's your advice for them in that area of strength and conditioning?
I think first and foremost, I would 100% echo what Adam was saying. Collaboration is going to be key. Oftentimes you might feel like you're on an island with just how busy schedules are and how fast things move. But the more you can put your trust into the people that you're working with, I think the better the outcome is going to be. At the end of the day, we want to have the student athletes experience in our mind, and we want to structure something that's going to give them the most success at any point throughout their journeys in high school, as well as beyond. So how can we set them up for success in the future with what we're doing now? And I think that a lot of times we feel like we have these quote limitations with scheduling and time and staffing, but I think you need to reframe your train of thought and see how you can turn those limitations into opportunities. And a lot of times it means you have to get creative. And as a coach, I've had to get creative a whole lot with the space and the time and the structure that we do have in place. But if you have the right mindset, it can be a lot of fun. And I think that it's important to, again, think outside the box a little bit. I don't think you need the most technology and the biggest staff. I think you have to create a system that's going to educate and even put a little bit of trust in the athletes to have some ownership of that process. And the more confidence you can build in these athletes, I think the better the outcome is going to be. Because you as a coach can take, or athletic director or teacher, whoever, you can take a step back and you can kind of see things play out and see some leaders emerge and see some growth. And I think that's important because we are educating these adolescents in a way that they might not be getting in other aspects of their lives. So getting creative with whatever structure you do have and needing to think outside the box and putting some trust in the whole entire team, athletes and students included.
Well, I love it. Just great, great advice. And for you, one more time, one of our listeners wants to connect. And listeners, I think you got a couple of great resources here. What's the best way that our listeners can get in touch with Nicole Fowler?
My email is nfowler@exeter.edu, but it might not work for that much longer. I'm in the process of a name change. I recently got married. So if N Fowler doesn't work, then N Sampson would be the email, which is NSAMPSON @exeter.edu.
Well, hey, congratulations on that. We have breaking news on the podcast. I love it. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Adam and Nicole, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to share with our listeners. All the best moving forward. And we're going to be watching Phillips Exeter teams this year. Make sure they're doing well. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, we want to say thanks to our listeners too, and remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every week. We share stories and not every week, every day. We share stories and best practices. So come back next Tuesday for another Tech Tuesday episode, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. As always, we want to say thanks to our sponsors. If you've been listening for a long time, you know who they are, but I'm going to say them anyway. We want to say thanks to Gipper. We want to thank Huddle and Home Campus. I want to thank Hometown Ticketing. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards, Snap Raise Fundraising, Vital Signs Wall of Fame. We also want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. We want to thank Ohio University, and we're going to throw in K-12 Sports Tech, our Wednesday Wisdom sponsor. Also, if you're still listening at this point, I've been doing this for most of the 4 years we've done the podcast, and recently we just had our very first winner. I know I've done this at least 50 times. If you're still listening, shoot me an email or text me if you have my cell phone. And the first person to do this, I'll give you $50. I'll just send it Venmo or Zelle, just as a thank you for listening to our sponsor shout outs. The only exception is Troy Ferguson is no longer eligible. Troy was our winner. He was walking on the treadmill, or I guess he was doing his workout, and you just listened to the very, very end of the podcast, and he heard this. So if you're listening, if you're the first one, $50 is coming your way, just as a thank you for listening to the podcast. Thanks to everybody, and we'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.